So today we drew mental health and school education. So this one's going to be interesting because, I always like to start off with giving our definition. And we give our definition because everyone has a different definition, and it all depends on your upbringing, society, and the things that have influenced you. And we like to provide our definition so it builds context for our dialogue here today. So that way our conversations, you have an understanding of the context and the definitions that we're having dialogue about. So I guess we'll start with mental health. So I went and checked the CDC's mental health definition, just so that we have some sort of generic mental health definition. And it's your emotional, psychological, social well-being, which affects how you think, how you feel, how you act with people. It's how we handle stress and how we connect with people and ourselves and relate to others. And this can include anxiety. It can include emotional disorders, bipolar, depression, eating disorders, OCD. There's a whole bunch of different disorders that fall under, mental health. And I mean, I'm going to ask you what you feel your definition is, and then I can share mine.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I would say there's lots of different diagnoses or terms to describe mental health, like bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety. There's so many other elements to it. And I think mental health to me is definitely kind of correlated to physical health. That's kind of how I correlate them. So there's certain things you do to get your body in physical condition, right? Exercise, diet, sleep, hydration. But those same metrics also help the mind as well. So if you're talking about a healthy mind, it's going to be very tough for you to have a healthy body and vice versa. Now, that being said, there is obviously some medical conditions that people have been born with, that they've experienced with. So they're going to have a little bit of a different way of coping with their mental health issues. But there's always things that you can incorporate day to day to help with those symptoms while you go through and kind of deal with what you've been given. So that's kind of my, I guess, bubble of what I would say mental health kind of means to me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again, everyone has a different definition. For me, in mental health and the work that I've done and my experiences and the work I've done with my consulting and my coaching is, mental health has a great deal to do with trauma and your emotions. And so, that's not to say that and I will never come from the angle of saying anything's easy or anyone has it easier. Mental health for everyone is relative.
Yes.
And if you're dealing with anxiety and depression, that's your mental health. And that could be incredibly challenging. And no challenge is, better or worse than any other. And, some of the works that I followed are, Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Nicole Lapura, and even Dr. David Hawkins, because they correlate mental health with trauma. And I meant to pull it up and I didn't get to, but there's a psychological test that psychiatrists use, and it's there to gauge your degree of severity when it comes to mental health based on the predisposition of the experiences you've had when it comes to trauma. Now, this test is more specific to physical trauma, and I think if we explored emotional trauma, the scale would be quite different. And so for me, mental health has a lot to do with trauma. And I know for myself, as I started to heal my trauma and my emotional wounds, that it has directly correlated with the health of my mental capacity and how I show up. And I know even with my ADHD and my anxiety and my depression, that dealing with mental health and healing those wounds and feeling those emotions has allowed me to transcend my mental health and be able to navigate in a healthy way. And so I do strongly believe that mental health is very much linked to our emotional traumas. And I think often as they go unresolved, again, it directly correlates to the degree at which we're going to experience mental health. And if you have a ton of unresolved trauma, your mental health is going to progressively get worse, because as you experience life, you're going to get more trauma, layer on top of more trauma, on top of more trauma, and then that's going to
make it even bigger than what it is, right?
Yeah.
And that's what most people kind of struggle with, is sometimes they don't even think they have an issue, right? Because I always like to say mental is not like physical pain, right? If you physically saw someone with a broken arm or a cast, okay, you know that they've done that. Well, if you look at people, you really don't know sometimes what's going on in their brain or what they're giving meaning to or not meaning to. And so that can definitely spin people on a spiral, either in the wrong direction or right direction, depending on which way they focus it. And I've worked with lots of people with mental health. My ex-girlfriend had bipolar, my old roommate as well had bipolar, so I had lots of different experiences with that in my life. And, it's tough for them to sometimes decipher like what emotions or what feelings they need to entertain. And then when things go wrong for them or things start to get rough, it just becomes a bigger animal if they don't stop it. So it's very sometimes not as simple as a cookie cutter, like do this and this is fixed. There's a lot of different things you have to take into consideration. But I know right now they were talking about it even when I was teaching that, mental health is going to be one of the largest deaths, if not already, in North America. We're starting to see a lot more people with mental health issues. We're starting to see a lot more people not knowing how to cope and handle that. And then even at the workplace, like people don't know what to do. Like if somebody has an outbreak or an issue or episode, how do I navigate that? Well, unfortunately, they can leave and be on a leave for a while, and you're still going to have to pay them to do the work, even though the work's not getting done. So it's also going to affect businesses as we move forward. And so I think right now in the country, it's a bigger issue, and a lot of professionals are struggling themselves trying to figure out how do we navigate through this and help people the best way we can.
Absolutely. And, in the experiences I've had with clients and, different industries too, that you're seeing them really struggle, obviously after a pandemic.
Yes.
We were struggling pre-pandemic. Now we come out of it and people are struggling even more. And I think one of the best places to start is in the emotional healing. And so whether that's creating awareness about your emotional states and creating a space to starting to feel them, I think that's how we start to identify the trauma. And it's one step in the direction of healing that trauma. But the other, piece that we pulled, the other topic was school education. So I found it, again, it's always interesting how these come out, mental health and school education. So I thought, let's talk a little bit about school/education. And I think we're fairly experienced and experts enough in this realm. We're both very well educated. We've both taught in different systems. And so, I think we can both agree that the system is definitely faulty.
Yes, I would say there's a lot of holes right now that's in the system. We still have that old style of educating, and as the world's changed, not much of that has changed, but the people have changed. And so now, even when I was teaching, and this is like 10 years ago, I already was having a tough time with that. I brought in a lot of new ideas to try to make things a little easier on my students, because a lot of them did have some mental health related issues. And I was getting a lot of negative feedback from that, saying that we don't do that here, right? And now those people that were struggling then are now retired, and they seem pretty upset. The ones that I did work with, they were really happy in their role, and I don't think much has really changed. I remember when I was working with the principal, I was really talking about this stuff, and he goes, we need people like you to kind of spearhead that, but you won't really win this battle by yourself. It's very difficult to try to get the education system maybe kind of look at things differently. And he's like, all the points you're saying, we agree with, but to get everyone on board with that, it's not a battle I would suggest that you do. So I dropped out of that world at that moment in time. Well,
it's hard because you're spinning your wheels. And I think the people within the educational systems understand, that this conventional means is not helping social skills and not helping. If anything, it's enabling mental health issues even more because it's creating so many barriers for kids, right? Education should not be a one size fits all. Of course, the issue is it's hierarchical.
Yeah.
Having issues with that word today. And so it always starts from the top, and it's people being told, this is the curriculum, this is what you're going to teach, this is how you're going to teach it. And regardless of you agreeing or disagreeing, if you're a teacher, you've chosen to have a role in that industrial mind. And so you have to go through the motions of teaching what you're told to teach. And yes, some teachers are more innovative where they can bring ideas and creative ways of bringing in social skills. Ultimately, it's not conducive in an educational system. And I mean, I've taken every science, every math, everything you could probably think of in any realm of science. And, did that help me with my mental health in any way? No, it didn't. However, school does, I think, if you look at the positives, it teaches you, how to learn. It teaches you how to teach yourself, because often the methodologies used in teaching aren't the best. And I had to teach myself how to learn content. It teaches you discipline. It doesn't give you certain life skill values. However, it's up to each individual to try to find those. And depending on the support I think you have at home, you may not look to see those soft skills that are generated out of these hard skills.
Well, I would say education system gives you a good framework, but the details in the educational system is where people get lost. So like me, I have 6 years university, 3 different degrees. When I met Bob Proctor, he used to go on stage and make a joke about me. Chris has more degrees than a thermometer. Yet I don't have anything past high school, grade 10, and look at how different our lives have turned out at this point, right?
Yeah.
Things obviously change. But the one thing that I did teach, and you touched on a few points, was, discipline, focus, self-learning. One thing that really got me to step out of my zone was when I actually got to university, was stepping outside my comfort zone and networking and meeting people and connections. And all those things that I went through to learn helped me in other areas in life. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some courses where I got some great information and some not so much. But you try your best to say, what else could I take away from this as a positive thing? Because I think a lot of people do bash and get upset with the educational system. And they say a lot of things, but they're not looking at both sides of things to say, okay, what are the good things, but how can we incorporate some new ways of doing things to help kids and obviously the youth think a little bit differently and make better decisions after school.
And I think that's where parents and kids have to take that initiative, because if we're waiting for the school educational system to change, it hasn't changed in how many years? It's really, and it might be another 50 years before they even start to change it. Things usually have to collapse before they start to see.
Yes, and it's funny, but I remember the phys ed head that I worked with, and I'm not going to say the school because that was my first experience teaching. I had gone in and taught a grade 9 phys ed class, and I was like, okay, let me see what you've guys been doing, because I want to make sure we're all teaching, the same scope and the same units, blah, blah, blah. And so he gives me all this work that he's got for the kids, and it's stuff from like 1990, 1980, and I'm like, this is all really old. Like, did you have anything updated? He goes, no, once you make this, Chris, you just teach this the rest of your life. And that was his thing. Like, he's like, I'm making good money. I leave at 2:00 and I don't have to do anything anymore. I did the course once, so it's done.
Yeah.
And that to me is like a poor way of going about being an educator. I don't think that's what you should be doing. So it also depends on who's spearing it and who's running it. So
it does. And their understanding of, teaching and learning and how ambitious they are at fostering that change, and also fostering a change when sometimes that change, you could be reprimanded, right?
Oh,
so I think, when it comes to school and education, do we rely on that to provide us with social skills? No, but then that's the work that people, like experts like you and I do, that are outside of the educational system. I work with, and you do too, and we try to build that support capacity, because those soft skills are not things that people have acquired in conventional education, and it's not conducive to supporting social skills in any way. It is, I think, up to parents and kids to have that awareness to say, okay, this is what I'm going to acquire from this. I'm going to be able to set a goal, and I'm going to be able to achieve that goal, and I'm going to build the discipline and the focus to get there. Those are great skill sets that then translate into real world things, but thinking that, have I ever used any of the calculus I ever learned? No. Only when I'm having to teach my kids their calculus in their school's system. But aside from that,
you got to have the social aspect as well as the education. You got to have the balance. And you're right. Parents need to have that conversation. Staff can definitely have that conversation. Teachers as well. Like even me, I hired a guy at my gym one time that had a PhD in biomechanics and human movement. So way level higher than I, right? And I fired him the same day. And I was like, what happened to him? I go, he couldn't articulate what he was doing. He couldn't work with people. So I asked him, when you were going to school to learn fitness and health, what did you do? Because your resume looks great. You interviewed well. And he goes, I just took the pen and wrote down the weights when I was interning. I don't actually do any of this stuff. So I go, you understand the books, but you don't understand people. And so that is a very big disconnect that I see sometimes happen when you're so immersed in, I need to study, pass this test, on to the next thing, and not look outside of that. Because when the world comes out there, you get punched in the face, and it's not pretty.
Well, that's it. You could be the smartest person, I would say I have a high intellect because of the education I acquired and the information I received. Does that make me an incredibly good social person? Does that make my soft skills? No, I had to work at those. And I worked at them because I identified that I didn't have the social skills, and my mental health was, being challenged. If anyone had asked me, if I had mental health challenges before, I'd say the last few years, I'd say no, because it is something, or the last decade, it's something that's kind of new age, and it's new age for a reason. More people are struggling. And, the school system isn't going to help support it. There are times and there are, I think, resources and like I said, ways that you can draw some support, but ultimately it's not conducive to a fluent support system. And so, I always say, no one's going to save you. You have to save yourself. And how do you do that? Well, I think, building the awareness about your emotional states, and also be the change you want to see. For myself, I'm a parent. So, helping my kids with their mental health means I have to help myself with my mental health. I can't help my kids, or I can only help them to the depth I'm willing to help myself. And if I'm not taking care of my mental health and for me, that means I'm identifying my emotional state, I'm feeling my emotions, and then I'm deciding how I want to show up. That is, it sounds simple, but ultimately there's so many layers to that. That is how I can help myself and my mental health, and then help others. And so I think that's a big key in people finding and creating support for themselves.
And people need to learn more about how to handle and deal with mental health and with other people. Like I have in a story, one of my clients I'm seeing today, she's in high school. She has 2 or 3 mental health related issues. And she'd come in the other day and she was really upset about her phys ed class. She had a broken arm. She couldn't really do a whole lot. And her teacher just snapped at her. What's wrong with you? Yelled at her and got her mad and kicked her out of class. And then she left school for the day. And I'm like, If he only knew like what she was dealing with, he probably would have not given her that response. Now she has this wall built up and she doesn't want to talk about it anymore, even be acknowledging it in the classroom. And now you've kind of had this person trying to deal with it on their own. And that's where you're going to see the blow-ups happening, or things get really, really bad for that person if they don't know how to cope and handle it better.
It's true.
So people have a better understanding of it. Even, my ex, she was at one time, was hospitalized, and her boss was going to fire her over that because he thought like we broke up and that was why she was upset. And like that would have been a problem for him, but he just wasn't aware of what to do or how to handle it. So I actually had to go in and have a conversation with the staff and tell like, listen, this is what's going on. So you guys are better able to handle it, because most people, he looked here and said, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do here? Like, I was just going to fire. Like, but now that I realize it's not that, like, I don't know. So I think there's a lot of people right now that are not really understanding it a whole lot. And I think they need to do a better job of understanding what people go through mentally when you are in a workplace, an education system, or really just anywhere. A lot of people are very sensitive these days and get offended a lot more. And so you got to be mindful sometimes of how you respond.
Yeah. And life is offensive. I mean, if you're going to interact with a human being or anyone, you expect to get offended and to offend. That is the nature of being humans and interacting, right? And I think, in many cases, organizations don't support their employees because if you don't have the skill set, and I truly believe everyone does the best with what they have and what they know. And if you don't have that knowledge and you don't have the initiative, you're not taking the initiative to find that information outside of your system, yeah, it's going to be really hard because, again, you have to be the change, right? So the more you create self-awareness, the more you understand the resources, you understand how to navigate your own mental health, you can then help others. But, an example of this teacher that you use, obviously that person is not, aware to create that mental health, change within themselves or to support their mental health and to make those changes. So they can't see beyond that and to help others. And so I think the key in all this is, again, just taking care of your own mental health, finding ways that are going to work for you, the support, the counseling, whatever it is that people need to really create a safe space to navigate their emotional state and their trauma is going to lead to their, better state of mental health. And again, it's going to be up to you to find that. So I hope listening to our podcast helped because, our goal is to empower you, and it's all about rising to your potential. It means you're taking care of your mental health. Yeah. And you're taking care of yourself in all aspects. So again, I hope you start with just seeing how you feel, identifying your emotions, and trying to find your trauma and allowing yourself to feel it so that you can then start to move through those emotions and start to heal yourself in every aspect. So we hope you enjoy this, and we hope that it's helping you foster some change in your life.